when I look back on my experience at IIM Indore, I don't really think it was an MBA at all. I started to realize that there are aspects to my leadership style and my way of thinking that need a significant amount of evolution. You guys are quite honest. You guys are quite
Yeah.
realistic. You don't sugarcoat things. You're very clear, and I think I needed that. The profile builder itself as a package was quite unique. I hadn't seen any other consultants at offering something like this, and I think it forced me to take a step back and to say that I'm not prepared. Going through the profile builder for me was an awakening on that front. I think it gave me a good understanding as to what extent of clarity I need in life. And I think that's when it became very clear to me that INSEAD is the school that I wanted to go to. It worked out. I really appreciate you guys for that.
What does it take to get into an elite business school? MBA Crystal Ball is a boutique admissions consulting firm. Each year, we help a select few applicants get into the world's best business schools. Here's one of our success stories to inspire and educate.
Hello and welcome to MBA Crystal Ball YouTube channel. Today we have with us Ameya, who has had quite an eventful career journey. Ameya has been in touch with us since 2017 and took a very planned, methodical approach that started with her MBA profile builder and landed him in places like INSEAD and BCG. Let's find out how he did that. Welcome, Ameya.
Thank you, Manish.
Thanks for doing this, Ameya. For starters, could you give us a sense of your qualifications, and tell us a little about yourself?
Sure, Manish. So I was part of the first batch of the integrated program in management at IIM Indore. So this program was a 5-year integrated program, combined liberal arts in the first 3 years. So you could pick and choose the kind of subjects you wanted to study. There was a good combination of obviously the core management subjects, statistics, economics, etc. But also there was a good amount of social sciences, a decent amount of performing arts, and some amount of language as well. So that was the first 3 years. And then the last 2 years, we got integrated into the same postgraduate program classroom setting that we had. And the curriculum was exactly the same. So I joined that program in 2011. I graduated in 2016. From campus, I got into Tata Sky as part of their management trainee program. I was selected for sales. So it was a 1-year program. You do different rotations and you eventually end up in the function that you were selected for. I joined them for sales, so I ended up in sales. Towards the end of my management training program, I came across this interesting program at Maersk, which was and sort of a changed approach to their erstwhile leadership program. So Maersk has always had a very strong leadership program called the Maersk Line Graduate Program, and they decided to tweak that a little bit and take a slightly different approach to it, and they called it Go with Maersk. So it was a program in collaboration with UC Berkeley and Stanford. So we were 70 graduates from across the world. So I came across the program. It was an exciting program. I said, look, Tata Sky had its challenges in terms of a future, because entertainment was moving towards the likes of Netflix and online streaming, etc. And two, I think I wanted to have a more global career. So I thought, this is a great program that gives me access to what I'm looking for. And that's when I applied to the program and eventually got selected. So we were two of us from India as part of the program, 70 of us globally. The way the program was structured was we had 4 learning modules over 2 years, and then 2 job rotations within India. So I did a job rotation in customer experience. I did a job rotation in operations. I was quite lucky. I did a third job rotation also, which was more in e-commerce, because Maersk was trying to get into e-commerce at that point in time. And during these job rotations, every 6 months, you have training modules all across the world. So for me, it was Shanghai. It was then in Berkeley/Stanford. The third one was in Kenya, and then the fourth one was in Copenhagen, which was the Maersk headquarters. So that's the first 2 years. And then after the 2 years, you expatriate to a different geography. And that's how I ended up in Southeast Asia. Came to Cambodia, was leading a P&L for Maersk in Cambodia, and then eventually was leading a P&L for the whole Mekong region, Vietnam, Cambodia, Myanmar, and Laos. After that is when I ended up at INSEAD and
Right.
BCG after.
Yeah, that's quite an eventful journey. But before we move on, if I can take you a little back, so about this integrated program, if you could talk a little about how does one, kind of get into it? And how was your experience overall? Did you feel it was at par with the regular program? How did you compare the experience?
Sure, sure. So the process to get in is fairly similar to the CAT. So you have
Okay.
an aptitude test, which
Okay.
is quite similar in nature to the CAT. You have different sections and you go through the test. They take the scores of the aptitude test and then create sort of a raw score that gets you an interview. And then after the interview, they combine the scores and then you eventually get selected into the program. In terms of the program itself, I think I was the first batch, so there were a lot of things that IIM Indore was learning as
Right.
part of us developing and growing in the program itself.
Right.
But to be very honest, I think it was a great experience. I honestly feel like the kind of manager I am today or the kind of leader I am today largely is because of the fact that
Hmm.
the program gave me a very different approach to thinking about problem
Right.
solving and thinking about in general approach towards people, approach towards growing your career, etc. And then a lot of people, I think, had doubts about the program's success and
Yeah.
whether this program would eventually turn out to be something that would change the course of education in some form, right?
Hmm.
So funnily enough, my batch, when we went into the PGP program, the top 10 rankers, seven of them were from the IPM class.
Wow. Okay.
So academically also, we ended up
Wow.
performing
Hmm.
a lot better, right? Which is
Hmm.
quite interesting as an outcome.
Right.
I think the program's evolved very significantly since then.
Okay.
Of course, career outcomes when we were there were still relatively hazy because recruiters didn't understand
Hmm.
what we can
Hmm. Hmm.
expect from a graduate who's an IPM graduate, etc. Um, I think the form that the program has taken today is very different, right? Most ambitious people join the program, leave after 3 years. I know so many of my juniors who have left the program after 3 years to go to an IIM Ahmedabad or an IIM Bangalore
Okay.
or an IIM Calcutta. And I think my sense is that's the kind of direction that the program will head into eventually, where getting a PGP from IIM Indore may not necessarily be the ambition that someone goes into the program with.
Yeah.
However, the undergraduate section of the program is extremely exciting, and I think
Hmm.
it makes you a leader, a very well-rounded leader when you get into the corporate world.
Right. And the undergraduate program, they call it the BBA. What do they call it?
They call it now, I think it's 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 a Bachelor of Arts in Management
Ah,
Studies or
okay.
something like
Got
that.
it.
I
Okay.
think that's because IIM Indore can now give degrees, so you can actually get
Hmm.
a degree after the 3 years.
Right. Right. Excellent. So, now kind of moving ahead. So you already had your MBA at a rockstar career, and so tell us how and why you started thinking of a second MBA, and as you, kind of crystallize those plans, and why did you decide to kind of approach us, for this profile builder as well?
Sure. So honestly, Manish, I think when I look back on my experience at IIM Indore, I don't really think it was an MBA at all. If you, in a realistic sense, what an MBA should be is you being able to develop a network that you can lean on, you being able to learn from the classroom setting itself, not exactly from the academic content that the MBA delivers you, right? I think for us, given that we did not have any work experience before actually getting into the last 2 years of the
Yeah.
program. I would think of it more as a MIM program than an MBA program, right?
Sure.
I think that wasn't so clear when I graduated because, of course,
Hmm.
in India, the context of an MBA is still, you
True.
finish your undergrad, you go into an IIM, and then that's
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 right.
an MBA, right?
Correct.
I think when I got into Maersk and when I started interacting with my program mates from across the globe is when I started to realize that there are aspects to my leadership style and my way of thinking
Hmm.
that need a significant amount of evolution. And the only way I can actually get that is by taking a step back at some point in time from my career, taking that 1 year or 2 year break to go back to school with a very clear idea in mind of what I want from that MBA program and then going in there and trying to get it. So hence that early thought and reaching out to you in 2017, right? So I joined Maersk in
Yeah.
2017. That's exactly when
Right.
I started meeting people from across the world, started seeing how they think, how they build networks and everything that comes with it, right? So that's when I got in touch with you guys because A couple of things. One, I'd always seen posts of Samir and you on LinkedIn, and I always thought, the way you approached helping students to find their dream school or get into their dream MBA program was something that I quite resonated with. And what I mean by that is you guys are quite honest, you guys are quite
Yeah.
realistic. You don't sugarcoat things.
Yeah.
You're very clear. And I think I needed that, right? Because I also needed that awakening call to say, hey, am I in the right direction? Am I
Right.
not? Should I be reconsidering things, etc. Right? I think that was important for me. And two, the profile builder itself as a package was quite unique. I hadn't seen any other consultants at that time offering something like this, and I thought I'm very early on in this journey. I genuinely do not know, how to frame my story or what should I be doing, but I wanted to approach this in a manner where I look at you guys as sort of guidance for me to build on, from there and to say, okay, if I really want to do an MBA and if I'm so committed to it, then might as well just take a very targeted approach to it, and getting help early on to understand what it would take for me to get there was quite important. I think these two were the primary
Right.
driving factors to look at the profile builder.
Well put. And it might be a little kind of back in history, but I mean, do you remember, how the profile builder may have helped you, how it kind of eventually also maybe, kind of got into the way you articulated your applications later on?
Yeah, yeah. So Manish, to be very honest, I think from my IIM Indore times, I always thought of myself as a good orator, and I always thought that, I'm someone who communicates well. And I think the profile builder gave me a little bit of an awakening to say
Right.
that, hey, there's very limited space in an essay for you to communicate your
Yeah,
story. This is not a speech, right?
that's right.
And how on earth are you going to communicate all of that life experience that you have
Right.
had and your journey in life in as many as 200 or 300 words, and still make sure that whoever is reading it gets the emotion of what you're trying to communicate through it. I think going through the profile builder for me was an awakening on that front, right?
Right.
And interacting with you as well made it very clear to me that, hey, dude, like, you have to up your game in
Right.
terms of how you are presenting your story. Yes, the content might be there. You might have had the
Correct.
experiences, but you also got to learn to articulate it. And of course, in the process of articulating it, you've also got to be very clear in your head as to what you want to communicate,
Right.
right?
Right.
I think it gave me a good understanding as to what extent of clarity I need in life.
Yeah.
And it cannot be as vague as saying, yeah, I want to do a second MBA
Correct.
because I am Indore is so and so or whatever, right? And this is my career journey. I grew up in Bangalore, I went to IIM, and this is what it is. But what is it that makes me unique in an MBA classroom? What is it that I bring to the table?
Yeah.
And I think it forced me to take a step back and to say that I'm not prepared. I'm
Right.
genuinely not prepared.
Sure.
And I need to reflect on this, and I need to first 100% convince myself that I want to do it. And if I want to do it, why? And the answer needs to be convincing to me. And then I need to find a way to articulate it in the best manner. So I think that was one huge learning. And the second was you guys being realistic about
Yeah.
setting my expectations in terms of
Sure.
what I can expect for schools and stuff like that.
Right.
So I
Right.
think I think both of those were very good to have that early on,
Sure.
because otherwise, it's this nice bubble that you're building around
Hmm.
yourself, and suddenly it bursts and you
Yeah.
have no clue about
Right.
how to deal with it, right? So I
Right.
think for me, those two were the
Perfect.
biggest
Perfect.
takeaways, and I really appreciate you guys for that.
Perfect. Perfect. And I mean, so, now tell us, what kind of scores did you apply with? And, I mean, why did you kind of eventually zero in on, the MBA at INSEAD? How was that decision-making process?
Sure. So, right after the profile builder,
Hmm.
I, forced myself to think about why do I really want the second MBA? Or
Right.
why do I really want to do another learning journey? Let's not call it second MBA, right? But
Hmm.
why do I want to do another learning journey? And what do I want from that learning journey in terms of professional outcomes, of course, but also in terms of personal growth and development outcomes, right? And when I reflected on it, I realized that my best growth in terms of career had happened at Maersk,
Hmm.
And the only reason, I mean, career, but also as a person, right, as an individual and as a human being, had happened at Maersk. And when I started reflecting, I realized that I attributed that only to the diversity that the program had.
Hmm. Right.
Because the Maersk program was 70 of us from 50 plus different countries in the world. Everyone thought differently. Everyone would give me feedback about how I was, what I did right, what I did wrong, what I could do better. I saw them, I was inspired in different ways. I realized that diversity was very important for me
Hmm.
from an MBA program. And second, because Maersk had allowed me to spend some time at Berkeley, I also knew
Right.
what the American approach to
Okay.
an MBA program was, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
And when I combined the two, I was like, okay, the American approach is not going to work for
Okay.
me. I
Right.
really want, a very inclusive, holistic, open environment where people
Hmm.
come in. We do not have one nationality that dominates the classroom, and
Right.
we'll learn about the world, and we grow from learning from each other.
Hmm.
And I think that's when it became very clear to me that INSEAD is the school that I wanted to go to.
Right.
Plus, coupled with the fact that it's a 1 year program, I didn't want to
Right.
invest 2 years of my life in a classroom setting again,
Yeah.
right? So I think that made it clear INSEAD was the program for me. I came to this conclusion, so I moved to Cambodia in 2019.
Hmm.
Towards the end of 2019 is when COVID started becoming a thing.
Right.
And around that time is when I came to the conclusion that NCR is the school. I want to do a second MBA. And this timing seems to be fairly good for me. Um, so, I said, okay, now that anyways I'm working from home, etc., I have a little bit of time on hand. Let me prepare for the GMAT.
Hmm.
Start prepping for the GMAT.
Right.
Mostly self-learning, never took any classroom sessions per se. And
Okay.
so I was supposed to take the GMAT in March of 2020. Yeah,
Hmm.
March of
Hmm.
20, which was when, COVID lockdowns or countries closing things became a thing, right? And
Hmm.
and Cambodia did not have a physical GMAT center
Okay.
uh,
Okay.
at that time. So I had booked actually flight tickets to go to Thailand and Vietnam to take my
Right.
GMAT, but
Right.
I couldn't go eventually because the borders were shut. And
Right.
then when the GMAT became online, the first version of the online GMAT did not allow you to take notes. So
Hmm.
you had to actually use the inbuilt screen
Online.
calculator
Right.
to
Right.
to
Right.
to
Right.
do your math. And I tried it
Hmm.
and I was like, this is just not going to work for me. I'm a
Hmm.
very pen and papery kind of a person. So then in a span of 2 to 3 weeks, I actually switched to the GRE
Okay.
because the online version of the GRE at that time was allowing you one sheet of paper
Okay.
that you could write on and you could erase. So you could
Right.
take like a transparent
Okay.
sheet and you could write on it and
Hmm.
you could
Hmm.
erase. And I was like, okay, this works. So I switched and I took the GRE. I ended up scoring a 326, not a great
Hmm.
score, but my quant score was great. So I had a 168 on my quant. My verbal was 158, which I had expected because I had never prepped for a GRE verbal, right? And
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
GRE verbal section is very different from the GMAT verbal
True.
section.
True.
So I laid this out very openly in my INSEAD application, and I said, look, these were the
Hmm.
challenges that I faced, and I think INSEAD was very comfortable with that because they said,
Hmm.
if you look at your GPA from IIM Indore, the kind of
Yeah.
scores you've got in subjects that are relevant to us, and if you look at your quant scores in the GRE, we think it's still a fairly good
Hmm.
score to have. So yeah, that was the eventful part of it. I
Hmm.
eventually applied to INSEAD 2020. I got in. I was supposed to start January 2021.
Hmm.
But I deferred my program by a year
Okay.
because of COVID and
Right.
because I didn't want to, have
Yeah.
a subpar learning experience at
Hmm.
INSEAD.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
I deferred my program by a year.
Okay. Okay. Got it. And now, I mean, how was the experience at INSEAD in general? And I mean, also walk us through or talk us, I mean, through about how does consulting recruiting work, specifically.
Sure. I think the INSEAD experience is amazing. When people say INSEAD is the best year of your life, I think
Yeah.
they genuinely mean it.
Right.
It is a great program. It is a great school. Both in terms of classroom learning. If I look back, I think classroom experience at INSEAD is easily 5-10x of IIM Indore.
Hmm.
And what you can learn from your classmates, the way the professors approach communicating something to you is a very different approach, right? And
Hmm.
I have very fond memories of my classroom experience at
Right.
INSEAD. 3 years on, I still remember exact moments, of some
Hmm.
classrooms and what that learning moment for me
Yeah.
was.
Yeah.
In terms of consulting recruiting at INSEAD, very structured.
Okay.
I think if you want to get into consulting, INSEAD is probably the place to go to.
Hmm.
I was part of the D class. The D class gets to do an internship.
Yeah.
And I never wanted to get into consulting. Consulting was never my career goal,
Right.
right?
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
always wanted to, I still feel like I'm a builder at heart. So I
Hmm.
wanted to go into an early stage startup
Hmm.
and build. But
Okay.
2022, when I was graduating, was not the best year in terms of VC funding and
Yeah.
in terms of startups, etc. So then when I went in, I said, okay, there are consulting internships. Why don't I try? I
Okay.
had nothing to lose. And I
Hmm.
said, anyways, I don't want consulting for my final goal. So
Hmm.
might as well give it a shot. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. So
Sure.
the way consulting recruiting works in INSEAD is you have fixed timelines. You go in. So for us, if you were applying for the internships, you go in within 2 months, you have your interviews. So very
Okay.
quick.
Hmm.
You go in January, about by March, you already have your interviews, and
Hmm.
by end of March, early April, you have an offer in hand already.
Wow.
Um, so that is for the summer internships, right?
Right.
And then eventually for full-time recruiting, again, it's very structured. All the three MBBs, McKinsey, BCG, Bain, have a very structured process for INSEAD. You submit an application, all time bound. Everything happens in the span of about 30 days.
Hmm.
You submit an application, you get interviewed, and you get an offer. And you choose to go to one of them. So for me, I think I was clear, BCG was the school. So one of the things that
Okay.
INSEAD helps you with is also because the class has so many consultants,
Hmm.
you get to see in some way or form what is the culture of the different
Right.
MBBs.
Right. Yeah.
I think I resonated a lot with the BCGers in my class, and I said, okay, I
Sure.
wanted to give BCG a shot.
Okay.
I applied. I don't think I was the best prepared for the interviews,
Hmm.
but it worked out. I think Merce gave me good business acumen that
Hmm.
helped me quite in
Right.
terms of my interviewing with BCG. Worked out. For my batch, BCG actually said, if you sign the summer offer, the full-time offer is also yours. You can take it with the
Okay.
summer offer.
Nice.
So
Okay.
summer internship was non-evaluative for me.
Right.
Um,
Wow.
I
Hmm.
went in. I think I had a lot of fun during my summer internship. I did a project in energy, an area that I had never worked in,
Hmm.
and ended up liking the team. Ended up liking, what consulting had to offer, and I said, okay, might as well go back, spend a couple of years, and see how that goes.
Right.
In
Right.
terms of,
Excellent.
anyways, I think it was a skill set that I realized that I was lacking.
Hmm.
Merck could give me great operating exposure, right? I
Hmm.
mean, give me a P&L today. I don't think I'll ever worry about running a P&L, but
Right.
help tell me to build a strategy. I think at that point in time, I would not have been able to.
Right.
I think
Right.
I obviously have a lot more confidence in that direction as
Sure.
well.
Sure. Sure. And I mean, doubling down on the recruiting itself, right? I mean, so from a prep perspective, I mean, so give us a little more, I mean, insiders look into how the prep works, right? I mean, for the interviews, I mean, what kind of support do you get? What kind of systems are in place? Just a little more flavor of that, maybe.
Yeah, yeah. So of course, I think your normal case books and a buddy system to case with, and even the MBB firms actually allocate a buddy to you for you to
Right.
case with or to try casing with.
Right.
So there's a very good ecosystem at INSEAD. Not just that, also INSEAD does structured workshops on like level 1, level 2, level 3 workshops
Okay.
on how you should approach the case interviews, what should be your style, etc. And also, the nuances of the different firms, right? What is
Hmm.
different from the PG
Right.
case interviews, the
Right.
McKinseys versus the Bains.
Right.
And INSEAD give you exposure to all of that. And
Got it.
they prep you well enough to say, okay, I know this process now, and I'm confident that what comes to me is
Yeah.
not a surprise.
Right.
Um,
Right.
so I
Yeah.
think that helps a lot. And two, I think it's very rigorous. It's,
Hmm.
you have to give it time. You have
Right.
to get a lot of practice. Of course, depends on what background you come from, but again, it varies extremely, right? Some people may not
Yeah.
require as much prep. Some people might require a lot of
True.
prep, but early on, you practice with others, your classmates who are BCGers, McKinseyers,
Hmm.
Bainies. You practice with them, and you know, right? What is your benchmark? Where are you
Yeah.
versus them? And then you can then start working your way upwards, and you again go and do a case with them, let's say a month or two later, and then you get feedback from them. Hey, do you think this is good enough for me to make it into the firm? And
Right.
that is a nice bar setting for you along the
Hmm.
way.
Hmm. And I mean, I think this is a very kind of I think common, I would say, concern, that many people going to INSEAD feel that, they hire only people coming from MBBs, right? I mean, so in your experience, right? I mean, so let's say if there were 100 people, that MBBs hired, what percentage is returning kind of, this thing, just as a ballpark?
Um, I would say it's somewhere around 50-50, right? So,
Right. Okay.
50% of the class are, I mean, 50% of the folks that go into MBBs are returning folks, and the
Correct.
remaining 50%
Yeah.
are new, completely new.
Right.
And
Right.
it's a sizable chunk. I think people
That's right.
have this very strong misconception, but it's a very sizable chunk
Exactly. Exactly.
of
Yeah.
non-MBB folks who end up at an
Correct.
MBB event.
Correct. Absolutely perfect. And so it's been like a couple of years, that you've been at BCG. So how has the experience been? Any standout moments that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I think my BCG experience has had a lot of ups and downs. So I
Hmm.
started my so I joined the Vietnam office as my starting point, and then eventually transferred into the Malaysia office. So I always traveled for work. Even until date, I have not done a local project in the country that
Right.
I have resided in. So
Yeah.
I've gotten exposure to Vietnam. I've gotten exposure to Malaysia, to Singapore, to Australia, to Philippines, and now Indonesia. So from a geography split perspective, I've done projects across. I think from an industry split perspective, I've done energy, I've done industrial goods, I've done financial services. From a topic standpoint, I've done strategy, I've done transformation, I've done cost takeouts, and I've done builds, which is very interesting. In Southeast Asia, BCG also
Hmm.
does build projects, which is, let's say, for example, working with a startup to actually build a product out with them, and
Okay.
then launch the product, go to market, and
Oh wow. Okay.
help the startup actually bring in revenue through that product. So I've
Right.
done the gamut of topics, I've done the
Awesome.
gamut of industries, and I've
Right.
done the gamut of geographies.
Right. Amazing. So as a kind of closing note of sorts, right? I mean, so anything that people outside consulting may not be aware of, or any suggestion that you may have for people looking for a career in consulting?
Sure, I think a couple of things, right? I think people tend to believe that coming into consulting is a win already. I think that is
Yeah.
win number one. You come in, and I think the journey doesn't end there, right? You have to find the right projects that you want to be staffed into. You have to put in the effort to actually stand out as a consultant. And especially, I think people underestimate coming in after an MBA. So you are
Hmm.
competing against someone who's homegrown, who has developed the
Hmm.
consulting toolkit already,
Right.
and you are wanting to compete against them. So I think, people underestimate that push that is needed to actually be
Right.
successful in consulting. So I think keep that in mind for sure when you come in, and have the energy to actually push for that 1.5 years, so that
Hmm.
you've created that image in the firm, people recognize you, and
Correct.
post that, I think it's smooth sailings. You've built a rapport for yourself in the firm of what kind of a person you are, what style, what's your spike, right? In the consulting
Yeah,
context, what's
that's
your
true.
spike, and
Right.
then obviously the partners know this is your spike, and you get staffed on cases where that spike is quite important for
Hmm.
success of that. So
Right. Right.
um, I think find your spike, make sure people can see it, and just double down on that would be my last words.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Ameya, for sharing these. I'm sure, I mean, all consulting future aspirants would benefit a lot from it. And all the best for your consulting and future career.
Thank you so much, Manish.
We hope you found this interview helpful. At MBA Crystal Ball, we've helped many applicants get into the elite business schools, often with scholarships. Reach out if you're looking for professional help with your applications. Good luck.